Hi, welcome back to another episode of The Purple Couch. My name is Boris Garcia, and I will be your host for today's episode. Today, we deliver an extremely important episode. It deals with important subject matter that many women and men continue to face in silence. So, a trigger warning is being placed as of now. Well, as the saying goes, when one teaches, two learns. Here to talk about a class that awakened past traumatic experiences for students and herself. Please help me welcome my high school teacher, Miss Liliana Trujillo. How are you doing, Miss Trujillo?
I'm doing good. I'm happy to be here.
I'm glad you're here. Miss Trujillo, I want to say first how strong and admirable I am of you because talking about a traumatic past is very hard. It's a very hard thing to do. So can you just give us a little bit of background about what happened when you got the class and what inspired that trigger?
So this was actually back in the spring of 2015, no, 2014. I was in my third year of teaching, so I was pretty brand new to the job. And my administrators gave me the opportunity to design a course that I completely had the power to design the curriculum, choose the students. And so social justice, I guess, was always something that kind of burned deeply inside of me. And I took this opportunity to create a course called Race, Class, and Gender in the U.S., where we focused on various different issues. But it turns out that the section of the class that was most impactful for students was the one about gender. And so when we started talking about gender issues, gender violence, rape culture, for example, I just noticed that I kept on changing my curriculum based on student needs. And I think what I learned from that class, I wasn't ready to learn. I wasn't quite prepared for what was going to come out in that class, but I'm glad it did. I think it has impacted a lot of the people in that class and outside of that class, and definitely me as a survivor.
So can you just take me back to what happened in that class specifically? What was that switch, that click with you and your students? What came out of that?
Well, first of all, I think I do want to recognize that in order to have the types of challenging conversations that we were having in class, it was my responsibility to create a safe space for students. So I put a lot of work in just creating a safe community where people could speak, where people felt respected, and also kind of recognizing my role as a mandated reporter. I was very conscious that I had a responsibility not only to educate, but ultimately to inform proper authorities when, a lot of challenging information came out from the students themselves.
So you're listening to the information, you're hearing your students.
Yeah.
What's going through your head?
So I always go back to this one specific day in this class. It was towards the end of the semester, almost to the end of the school year. I think it was probably sometime in May, when we had a discussion circle. A lot of the information that the kids were sharing with me was really problematic. Kids were participating in this rape culture themselves. There were moments where students were blaming the victims, and I'm whoa, full stop. We have to address this issue. And so I remember, in order to prepare for this discussion, I reached out to some of my colleagues that some of them I knew had experienced sexual trauma. And I also opened the invitation to any other adult who would like to speak on the topic. And so there were only female teachers who decided to participate, except for one male teacher. I don't remember if you know, oh my gosh, now I'm blanking on his name.
It's okay.
English teacher. Rommel. Yeah.
Okay.
So he was the one guy that did participate. And then we had other teachers who will remain anonymous because they asked me to keep them anonymous, who had shared either anonymously through like a letter that they wrote us. And then one other female teacher came and talked to us in person. And so anyway, so the bottom line was that these 3 female teachers that had shared their stories with us had experienced sexual violence in one form or another, either by an intimate partner, by strangers on the street. And so when I read their letters, it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, because I really related to one of the stories that one of the teachers shared. It was almost exactly what had happened to me.
And what exactly happened to you?
Well, there are a few different examples of what has happened to me. I, at this point in my life, had been keeping a secret since I was like 7. So what I shared with my students was a couple stories. The first one was that I was molested by my older brother when I was a little girl. And because I lived in a very abusive and violent and alcoholic household, I kept my secret. Actually, until 2 years ago. I hadn't told anybody what had happened to me until 2 years ago. And that was only because I had the support of my husband. Yeah.
This is just me thinking, so this happens to you. You're with kids who are experiencing the same thing.
Yeah.
You're going through different emotions. You're experiencing different things. Did you tell anyone outside of that group? Did you go and talk to authorities?
Yes.
Did you go and, can you tell me what happened?
Yeah. So actually, just to rewind a little bit, when I was writing my story, like I was not expecting for the response that I got from the students. So it turns out that after teachers had shared their stories, after I had shared my story, we went in a circle, and I just created the space, opened up the space for the students to speak if it moved them. And it turns out that adult women sharing their stories really kind of gave permission for the students to share their own. And so by the end of that circle discussion, every single girl in that class had shared that they had experienced some type of sexual violence. And this was all before they were 18. And so I was not ready for that. And I should have been. I think it was a little bit naive of me to not expect that. But yeah, definitely, like I mentioned, I am still a mandated reporter. So luckily we did have some mental health support teams on our campus. I reported it to them. I reported it to my principal. And so, a lot of CPS calls got made legally. It was my responsibility and obligation to do so. But I feel very blessed to be working at the school when I was, because my administration was very responsive. And based on my feedback, we created a day called Gender Day, where we kind of dug into these issues, not just of sexual violence, but just like the expectations that are placed on boys and girls that often result in these types of traumas. And so I felt like that was kind of empowering for me, for the students to know that like when you do say something, when you break that silence, not always, but at least in this situation, people are there to support you and people want to help. And the hardest part is just speaking, but that's up to the victim. And it's the hardest part, but it's in their hands.
That's right. And I just want to say I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
And I want to ask you, we have now, in recent media, we see people like Harvey Weinstein, we see Bill Cosby, we see Andrew Cuomo most recently, and R. Kelly. And we see these women speaking out and trying to tell their stories, and then we hear, well, why didn't you say nothing before? What do you think about that stigma, and how can you pass that through your education about breaking that stigma? And
this is something that I'm still processing, like I'm still struggling with these types of questions, because like I feel like I have a dual responsibility in certain situations, right? As a victim to speak up, and also as a mandated reporter to help when I know that help is needed. So when people ask, why didn't you say anything earlier? That's a hard question. There are lots of reasons why people don't speak up as soon as it happens. And at least I think based in my experience and from what I've gathered from the people that I've worked with, people don't tend to speak because they don't feel confident in receiving the support that they need. And I could just relate back to my own experience. So that question, my mom asked me that question. And at the time, I'm like, why does that matter? You know, like, why does it matter why I didn't? The fact is that I'm speaking about it now.
That's right.
You know, and maybe I should have told my mom, 20 something years ago what had happened, but I didn't. And when I was ready to speak, I spoke. And unfortunately, my family was not people who supported me in this healing journey, which I think is an answer as to why people don't speak. They don't feel confident that the people that they should speak to will support them.
That's right. And so what I'm gathering is that no matter what, everything should happen at your own accord and to your own time. Correct?
I don't know if that's true either.
Okay.
Because I think while a victim has the right to stay silent, that silence isn't helping anybody except their abuser. And something that really was eating me up inside is that I kept this secret about my own family, about my own brother, for literally 24 years, I think. And my silence protected him. He was able to go on with his life, but it was keeping me down. And it was potentially putting other people at risk. Like there are small children in my family whose parents never knew what had happened to me. And so while I think the consensus states that a victim should be able to take their time, I think it's a luxury that ultimately isn't beneficial when that silence is only helping the aggressor and potentially putting other victims at risk.
Well, you guys heard it here from Ms. Trujillo. I want to say thank you so much. I'm pretty sure this will definitely touch the hearts of anyone out there who has experienced these type of traumas or anything. Ms. Trujillo, thank you so much for being here with us today at the Purple Couch. You guys, my name is Boris Garcia, and I'm signing off. Catch you next time.